Hello. I've been told by several different people that I needed to do this, especially since I'm an author and I oftentimes write about things that I've endured or what God has brought me through, things that I still deal with today. So I guess we just gonna dive right into it. Um, I was born in California and I was raised in Florida. I've pretty much been in Florida since I was, I don't know, a couple weeks old, as far as I've been told. So, as far back as I can remember, my earliest memory was of um, one of my uncles molesting me. I was asleep in the bed and I woke up to this man with his private parts in my face. Um, I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm 4, 5 years old. I'm not even 100% sure of the exact age. All I remember about that moment was, when we were kids, when we were getting potty trained, our parents used to buy us the little cotton underwear with the plastic underwear to go over it. And all I remember is wearing those little cotton underwear. I don't remember being in school, but I woke up with this man's private parts in my face. Um, I'm scared. I'm not really sure what's going on because this is someone who's supposed to protect me. He's one of my uncles. He was supposed to protect me. And unfortunately, he didn't. And he did things to me that opened doors to uh, other issues as I matured and became an adult. Um, I don't want to go too in depth into it because I'm not sure about TikTok guidelines and how TikTok operates when it comes to, speaking on certain subject matters. But I was molested, or however you want to say it. Um, and that has stuck with me throughout my 48 years of life. Um, Also, in that, um, my mother was also on drugs. My birth father was also on drugs. I did not have a relationship with my birth father. Um, my mother was pretty much on drugs for my entire childhood. Um, Oftentimes, I was left with random people. I had been tied to a door and beat. Um, just, things that you would think parents wouldn't do to their children, not a loving parent anyway. And this testimony is not for condemnation. I just believe that my story is here to help someone else out. And I pray that that's what it does. And I pray that if anybody is dealing with any of the issues that I discuss throughout my story, that you will have the courage to go and tell someone that you trust, because I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who I could tell. I didn't know who I couldn't tell. So I kept it to myself. And of course, it was the normal thing that you hear. Oh, if you tell anybody, I'll kill your mother, or, something along those lines that was told to me as a kid. So I never said anything. So as I grew older, the more angry I became. Um, I began fighting. I was initially a recluse. I didn't really deal with anybody. I didn't want to be around anybody. Um, and I started getting bullied. And at some point, my mother was like, if you don't start standing up for yourself, then you're going to have a problem with me. Of course, that put fear in my heart, and it just opened up a door for all the anger that I had built up inside of me. And I started fighting. I didn't fight anybody, but if you push the button, I had no problem turning it on for you. Basically, that's it. As I grew, I started playing sports. My aunt tried to put me in anything she could to try to give me an outlet because my mother was in and out of our lives, me and my sister's life, um, for years. And that was my outlet, sports. Um, I knew that I was really good at basketball. I knew basketball was going to be my ticket out of Brevard County. And that's what I locked into. I started playing basketball. But all my life, all I heard was, you look like a boy, you act like a boy. That's all I heard. I never heard, oh, you're beautiful, or, you're such a pretty little girl. All I ever heard was, you look like a boy, you act like a boy. And as time went on, the more I heard it, the more I locked into it. And I will say, around my senior year in high school, one of my family members was in prison, and she called me, and she called me Chick. They all called me Chick as a kid, or Red. Those are my two nicknames growing up. And she said, well, Chick, I just want to let you know that I am a lesbian now. And in my head, I was like, okay, so be it. I mean, you're in prison for quite a long time, so you got to do what you got to do. That's what I said in my head. And it was like, in that moment, a door had been opened up to me, as if I was okay with it. And I started having dreams about women, which I had never had before in my life. And I didn't know what was going on. I started praying like, God, what is going on? Because I knew, per the word of God, that, homosexuality was wrong. And I understood that it was wrong. But I would, I tried to shun it or whatever. And I always had a boyfriend. I wasn't having sex with anybody, but I always had a boyfriend. Um, Unlike most people, I think I lasted a pretty decent amount of time. I was 18 years old when I lost my virginity. So sleeping around wasn't my thing. Um, and as time went on, I went to college. Freshman year, I got hit on by women often, and that made me want to fight. I just was like, get out my face. Stop, trying to coerce me into doing something that I'm not interested in doing. Um, then fast forward to my junior year in college, I met a young lady who ended up being a teammate of mine, and I'm not going to say any names, just to protect everybody involved or whatever. But yeah, I met a teammate, and we ended up being very close, um, which was nothing unusual. But as time went on, she lived far away, and I would oftentimes check on her. She would oftentimes check on me, and we began having these extensive conversations. Never nothing inappropriate, just long conversations. Um, I thought nothing of it. Then at one point, she called and she said, I want to tell you something. And she said, Zanetta, um, no. What happened was, she called me crying one day, and she said that her best friend told her she didn't love her anymore. And I was like, if you guys are sincerely friends, you guys will be okay, you know. And you just don't, end a friendship just like that. If you can't tell me what has happened in this friendship as to why, she doesn't want to be your friend anymore. So if you guys are sincerely friends, you guys will be okay ultimately in the end. That was my opinion. That's how I felt about it. So maybe about a week or so later, um, she gave me a little more information. And she said, Zanetta, my best friend isn't only my best friend, she's also my lover. And I was like, oh, okay, hey, do your thing. If that's what you do, that's what you do. I don't care. I don't knock you. I'm still here, love you to life, and we good. And she also said, well, I have a problem. She said, because I also have feelings for you. I'm also attracted to you. And I was like, I can't help you. That's not my wheelhouse. As a matter of fact, at the time I was dating a semi-pro baseball player. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm good off that. But we good, just don't try me. That was basically my take on the whole situation. So, but as time went on, we continued to communicate. And I mean, we had long, extensive conversations every single day, every night. Until one night, um, she said, there's something that I want to do for you. And I'm thinking that, because she knows I love music, we both love music, I love poetry and all of these things. And I'm thinking she's about to read some poetry for me. And lo and behold, she started doing other things on the phone that I had never experienced before. And in that, I threw the telephone. And my other best friend was like, "What's going on with you?" And I was like, "Nothing. Somebody's just clowning on the telephone." Picked the phone back up and I continued to listen. And it blew my mind because it turned me on. And I didn't know what to do with that feeling. And afterwards, they asked me how I felt about it. And I told them, I was like, "I don't know how I feel about it." And that was that. And then we discussed, hey, what's going to happen when we go back to school? Because we were on the same team and we had to spend time around each other quite often. And I was like, nothing's going to happen. Like, I'm not into none of that. But more and more time went on. And initially, one day I told her, I was like, "I think I am attracted to you." And she kept asking me, "You sure you've never been?" I was like, "I have never been with a woman in my life. Had no desire to be with a woman. But now here I am. I find myself at this crossroad that I'm attracted to this woman and I don't know what to do with my feelings. I don't know who to talk to about my feelings. I know that it's not of God." So I just kept my feelings to myself, basically. So then once we ended up back at school for the year, my birthday came around. No, before my birthday came around, she tried to kiss me and I rejected her. Because she was upset with her girlfriend at the time. And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing that." And a couple more weeks went past. My birthday came around. My 21st birthday came around. So they snuck into my room with a bottle of liquor and um, gave me a glass of liquor for my birthday because I didn't do anything for my birthday. I pretty much stayed to myself. And they left after us having our drink and clowning around for a little while. I got back in my bed and she came back. And she asked me, she was like, "Well, did you get everything that you wanted for your birthday?" And me, I'm trying to be bold. I done had got a little liquid courage in me. So I said, "No." I said, "How about that kiss that you wanted before?" Just trying to be bold. And I'm not being boastful at all by any means about my story. I'm just being honest. So she said, "Okay." And in my room, I had two beds, two twin beds, and I had a room to myself. So initially, uh, she kissed me and she quickly moved away. And she asked me how did I feel about it. And I told her that I wasn't sure because it happened so fast. So she said, "Okay." So we started kissing again. Once we started kissing again, we got more into the moment. And at some point, we stopped. So it was like, "Oh, okay, I actually did like that." And I'm still like, "Zanetta, what is going on with you? This is not what we do. We don't know nothing about this life." But people had always assumed that I did because I was a basketball player and I was a tomboy, but I wasn't. I had never had any interest in women whatsoever. Um, and that's on everything I love. I always had a boyfriend. Only difference is I wasn't sleeping with everybody. So, which is why I always had a different boyfriend because I wasn't giving it up. But so that moment happened. And as time went on, she started spending time in my room. And there was a particular night that she used my room often for her conversations with her girlfriend because her other friend did not know at the time that she was in the life. So she would always use my room because I knew what was going on. So this particular night, and I always played my music. I love music. She was in my room on the phone with her girlfriend. I just pretended like I was asleep. She was doing what she was doing, the same thing she had done on the phone with me, which should have been, a red flag in a sense, if you will. But at 21, I didn't pick up on that. Um, so um, eventually she told her girlfriend how she felt and what she wanted. So to make things short and sweet, other things took place that evening, and I ended up having my first experience with a woman. And in that, I literally want to wash my mouth out with bleach. I went and scrubbed my mouth. I went and sat in the closet. Like, what are you doing? Like this, this is not you. What are we doing? So nothing else ever happened again. So needless to say, I moved on because I couldn't experience more of what I experienced with her. I found another outlet. And in that outlet, um, led me down a road to basically becoming a homosexual. Um, and in that, I went through years of relationships with different people, different times. Uh, I'll say I ended up having to do 2 additional years of college because I transferred from where I was to school in Jacksonville. So when I got to Jacksonville, I was dealing with my emotions. I hadn't really told anybody. I had lost weight, about everything that I was dealing with internally. And I ended up meeting a gentleman, nice guy, but because of things that I was dealing with within myself, I didn't want to deal with him. And because I didn't believe in bringing people into my issues, my mess. And I just kept everything to myself. But he was very persistent. And at some point, we began to, I'm not going to say date, we started talking. But then something else random happened that gave me an outlet to remove myself and not deal with where I was and what I was dealing with him, because I just didn't trust having the discussion with him. And I didn't know how to have the discussion with him. So I removed myself. About a year or so later, he came back into my life. We became friends. And at this point, I was I will say I was a borderline alcoholic, pretty much. I was a borderline alcoholic. And honestly, all my life, I've been a drink. I had been a drinker all my life. They put beer in my bottle as a little girl at 2 years old. So I always drank. It was never anything to me. And I didn't understand until I came up out of it that I was pretty much a borderline alcoholic. But I was drinking every day. I was smoking Black and Milds every day. By this time, I was done playing college basketball. My eligibility was up. I still had a year to go, and he and I had gotten really cool. And he had just gotten out of a relationship, and I, again, on liquid courage, suggested, activities of intimacy, just because I wanted to know if I still had interest in men or not. And he obliged, and in that I became pregnant. First time ever attempting to have unprotected sex in my life. And it's no slight on him, but we really didn't even have sex when we conceived my son. Um, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But nevertheless, I ended up pregnant with my son. So I said, okay, Zanetta, what are you gonna do now? Because at this point I was really ready to drop out of school and say screw it, like I was over it. But it's like either you're gonna finish school or you're gonna drop out and be a bum. What you gonna do? So I chose to finish school. And but even before that, well, I didn't even know I was pregnant at the time. So I knew that I had a year left of school, and my plan was to go to the military. So once I went and did my physical and everything that I needed to do for the military, they said everything is great except for the fact that you're pregnant. And I was like, pregnant? Like, there's no way that I could be pregnant. No, me pregnant? Ain't no way. So nevertheless, I was pregnant. And I was pregnant with my son, and I had my son on December the 8th, 2000, and I graduated the following weekend on the 15th, walking with my son. My best friend had my son in the stands, and I walked across the stage in my heels. Um, and from there, I moved back home, stayed home for a year, and then I joined the military. And there are other things that I haven't talked about because you have to go pick up the book to hear the rest of the story. But I joined the military. Spent 3.5 years in the military, but due to medical issues, I was medically retired from the Army. Came home from the Army, basically still spiraling. Now I'm deep into the homosexual lifestyle. I'm wearing waves. I'm dressing like a dude. All of these things that, masculine women tend to do. And in 2009, I had to, a couple things happened in 2009. First, I had to have a hysterectomy, which I didn't know it was going to affect me the way that it did emotionally. I looked at my son, it's like, dang, I can't have any more kids. Not that I wanted to in that moment because I had no desire to be with a man whatsoever. From there, I um, I had the hysterectomy, went back to work. 2 weeks into going back to work, they said that swine flu was out. They didn't close us down, but they closed the schools down. So I had to leave work and go and get my son. Came back to work from there, about a week and a half later, my mother calls me screaming at the top of her lungs. Oh, they found your cousin dead. And I was like, what are you talking about? So one of my cousins who had in a sense disappeared, but we kind of thought that they were running from the law. They basically found her body 2 years prior, but they didn't inform us until 2 years later. So in my head, I'm like, these people are going to fire me from my job. I've never lost a job. And so much is just going on in my life at this time. But they're going to fire me. Sure enough, they fired me. First time ever being fired from a job. And I just didn't know, I was just so lost. I was so lost and I was just unraveling because I would even be at work. Like I was so on edge and I was already battling anxiety and depression. And for me, I looked at anxiety different than other people looked at anxiety. I just looked at it as I was being stressed out, because honestly, I'm just keeping it real. Us as Black people, we put it on our backs, on our shoulders, and we keep it pushing. That's what I did. But I just was so antsy and eager to just destroy anything in my presence. And I didn't understand what was going on with me, but I was just slowly unraveling. So much so that when they called me in the office to fire me, they waited the entire day to fire me. It's funny how they do that. They're going to get one more day at you before they let you go. But I was so far gone that I was like, y'all could have called me at home this morning and I could have stayed in my bed. That's pretty much what I said. That's exactly what I said to them. Y'all could have called me this morning. I could have stayed in my bed. So I didn't say bye to anybody. I walked in, changed my clothes, put my bags down, and I walked out the back door and I never looked back. By this time, I was in a new apartment because I had been in a previous relationship where I had a live-in lover, basically. That relationship went awry. So I was basically starting over, myself and my son. So I'm in this new apartment. I barely any furniture. Me, my son, no job. All I had was my disability to live off of. And at some point, I started going to, after we found out about my cousin being dead. No, before that took place, after I lost my job, I ended up dating a married woman. Um, and this married woman was a Christian. And so I was definitely confused as to what exactly was going on because this woman was supposed to be a Christian. But that's not to say that even in our time spent that I saw sincerity in how she moved, and I knew that she sincerely loved the Lord. I just didn't understand the process of what was going on. But the truth of the matter is, God can use any situation. He can take our mess and use it as and turn it into a masterpiece at the end of the day. Um, and some things took place, and she said to me, she said, Zanetta, um, I I wouldn't be surprised if you stopped dating women. And I laughed in her face because I was like, I don't want no dude. Like, I don't want no man ever touching me ever again in life. And in that, I laughed and went on about my business. Um, she and I ended up not continuing to deal with each other because I knew that I deserved more than what I had, and they needed to deal with their own issues, basically. But we were still very cool. We're actually very good friends to this day. But about 2 weeks after that moment, no, before that happened, when I decided to remove myself in a situation, she and I were on the phone, and I broke down in tears, and she started praying. I didn't understand it, but it was what it was. But the entire time that she was praying, the only thing that I kept hearing God say was, "Be still, be still, be still." That's all I heard. I can't tell you to this day what she prayed. And about 2 weeks later, by this time I had started going to an 8 o'clock service at one of my aunt's churches, and was contemplating joining the church, but nobody in my family knew that I was attending church. Um, and I grew up in church, but I just felt like the church that I grew up in, just things were just not right. I'm not going to bash the church per se, but to me, it was just more about religion versus relationship, and traditionalism versus having a relationship with God. That's what I know it to be today. Back then, I didn't know what it was. I just knew I didn't like it. And um, I had started going to church, and I ended up having a conversation with one of my best friends. And this best friend says, Anetta, hey, why don't you come and go to church with me? And I know she was surprised. I said, yeah, sure. And it's so crazy because even when I was operating in a life previously, I had went to church with her plenty of times, and even got baptized one of the nights that I was supposed to be headed to the gay club, and they took forever to show up. So I went to church with her and I got baptized. And it's just funny how the Lord works. But fast forward back to our conversation, she says, and that I really would love for you to come visit my church. I said, okay, awesome, no problem, I'll come. So I came. My guards were up, of course, because of things that I had experienced with church people already. And in that, when I walked in, they just hugged me, which was very strange to me. I didn't know how to receive that. um, and the pastor began to preach. And I just loved her honesty, and just you could hear the integrity in how she moved. You didn't see phoniness or hear phoniness in her or in around her. You just saw someone who was sincere about who they was. And and during the service, they were speaking in tongues, and I was looking at my best friend like, when I get out of here, Negro, I'm gonna bust upside your head. Because I had only experienced it once before, and it scared me, and I never wanted to deal with it ever again. So I didn't know what to do with it. So after service, they ended up having a bowling day, and she invited me, and I was like, man, I don't want to be around these people. I don't know these people. They don't know me, and I'm still waiting on the shoe to drop for them. So somebody to be phony and fake. That's what I was waiting on. So I was like, all right, I'll meet you over there. So I went home and changed. I put on a shirt that said, keep staring, I might do a trick. I had on me some baggy Jabot jeans and some Air Force Ones. And I think I might have had an afro, a mini afro at the time, because I was contemplating growing my hair out. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I still had waves. Um, and in that we went, um, and I ended up having a long, extensive conversation with the pastor at the time. Her name is Apostle Shauna K. Jackson. um, Ended up having a long, wonderful conversation with her. And I was like, man, she pretty cool. Like, okay, I could do her. And it was just, she was just a person who operated in integrity. And I could sense that off rip. So I started going back to Ola Joy, and I continued going to Ola Joy. Maybe about 2, 3 weeks in, they had a testimonial service. I didn't know what a testimonial service was. What I knew of a testimonial service was people basically telling all their business and all their dirt and having to confess before the church and that they was wrong, to ask for forgiveness, and that was it. And I wasn't about to do none of that. But as I was sitting there, you start seeing all these people standing up talking about God and the goodness of God and the things that God has done in their lives and how God has blessed them. And I was like, dang, okay. I'm sitting there and I'm feeling this yearning on the inside of me is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point I basically stood up and I was like, I've been a lesbian for 13 years and I'm tired of it. And I knew my mental, like I was literally on the verge of losing my mind. So much so that even before that happened, I was balled up on a knot in my mother's room on the floor, asking God what he wanted from me. I didn't understand what he wanted from me. And it's like, I've asked you, if this isn't what you wanted from me, to take it away from me, and you never took it away from me. So what am I supposed to do with this? I have all of these desires and I ask you to take it away because I was raised in you pray about it and you let it go. But then when I came to Ola Joy, I learned that faith without works was dead. There were things that I was going to have to do, Zanetta was going to have to do in order for change to take place. But I didn't know that until I came to Ola Joy. I didn't know that I had to change my people, places, and things. I didn't know that I was going to have to seek God about the subject matter. I didn't know that I was literally going to have to pick up my Bible and learn what the word says about making changes in your life and what he requires of us and dying to our flesh daily. I didn't know any of those things until I came to Ola Joy. So from that, I started serving in ministry and dancing in ministry. And the first year was a struggle. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like every 5 to 6 months, I was probably sleeping with somebody different. And my apostle asked me, like, well, at the time she was a pastor. She was like, "Was Anetta, have you always been this promiscuous?" And I was like, "No." And but then after the conversation, I thought about it. I was like, because the word of God tells us, if he ain't your husband or she ain't your wife, and you sleeping with her, then you're a hoe. Pretty much, man or woman, it don't matter. That's just is what it is. That's the lowest common denominator. So I went back and I said, well, I guess I have been being promiscuous. This ain't my husband. You know, these women are not my husband. This is not what God has called me to. So I guess so. So about a year after struggling, I locked into who God was calling me to be. And for 12 years, I lived faithfully without, falling short in that particular area. I wasn't drinking anymore. I wasn't cursing anymore. I had made a lot of changes in my life, and God blessed me immensely within that time period. Um, and fast forward to um, June, no, excuse me, till 2020, before COVID. The beginning of 2020, I received a word about my son because my son had kind of been just spiraling. Um, he's getting ready to graduate and he wanted to be the man, thought he was the man. Had friends that I didn't care for. He had a group of friends that I love and a group of friends that I didn't care for. And I made that very known. I wasn't, loud or obnoxious about it, but I just told them, hey, those are not your friends. And decisions that they're making and that you're making is not going to be conducive for who God is calling you to be, basically, is what I told him. So I ended up getting a word early in 2020 that Davion, which was my son, was going to be okay in the next couple of months. Nevertheless, about a couple months after that, June 17th, 2020, my son's life was taken because he was with his friends. Yes, I'm saying it, his friends. Um, People that I did not trust, people that called him his brother, that I never received that notion because I didn't have any more kids. And they just were not for him. Davion was headed to college. He had a football scholarship, and I was just grateful for the opportunity for him to go and see something different than what he saw where we were raised at. Um, but nevertheless, his life was taken, um, and that crushed me to my core. Now, initially, I tried to be the big girl, and I fought through my feelings. I never wanted to say that God, how could you let this happen? Or God, you told me that he was going to be okay, but he's dead. And, and it just, it ate at me so bad. And I blame myself because here it is. I had, dated women for 13 years prior. And, maybe if I hadn't dated women, my son would have had a father figure, or, a good man in his life to teach him how to be a man, to teach him how to express his feelings without having to express the way he felt via anger, and learn to have, conversations and communicate effectively to express how he felt. And I was like, I felt like it was my fault. I felt like it was God's fault. And I kept it all in. And initially, I paid very close attention to my surroundings. And now throughout the years, I've written several books about my life. They're all on my page. So now here it is. Here it is. I'm battling with my faith and who I thought I was in God, and the power that I thought dwelled in me. Because even in this time before his death, I had written, it was like a 17-page prayer that I pray every day for my son. Every single day I prayed for my son, except for the day that he was killed. And I blame myself for that. And in that, um I had a friend who, we've been friends for 30 plus years. Um, Someone that I didn't necessarily think that I had to pay close attention to, because there were plenty of women and people around me, men and women, that I could have fallen off the wagon with, so to speak. Um, Men that attempted, women that attempted, that I easily blew off. So here it is, this person that I trusted, and nevertheless, I'll just say things took place. And initially I didn't care, because I was mad at God, I was mad at me, and I just wanted to destroy everything that God had built in me, everything that I had built. And I stepped over the God in me. I stepped over who I knew I was in God, to go back to the vomit, to operate in what God had called me out of. I did that, not nobody else. I'm not going to blame anybody else for my decisions. Now, there are other pieces of that puzzle that happened that made that moment collide, that might not have had to do with me, but there was enough God in me for me to walk away. And oftentimes people say, oh, well, I don't know how to do this, and it's just too hard. I had gotten to a place where I was strong enough, and I turned back because, like I said, I was mad, I was angry, and I just wasn't talking to who I needed to talk to about the situation. I started having anxiety attacks. And like I said before, to me, when I saw other races have anxiety attacks, I thought it was weird, because to me, you do what you got to do and you keep it pushing. But after my son's death, I literally started having panic attacks, being balled up in a knot on the ground, to where one of my pastors had to come and pick me up off the ground, um, because I just was in a fetal position, balled up in a knot. And um, doctor puts me back on medication for depression and anxiety. I'm throwing up from the medication. I stopped taking the medication. I go to therapy, natural therapy, spiritual counseling. Um, but even in that, I was still struggling. Even before the counseling, because I was keeping everything so locked in, there are other things that I started doing as well. But you're going to have to get the new book to find out what those new things are, because I know you want to know what those new things are. And it's okay. I don't mind. But um, but I was literally unraveling, and I was trying to destroy my life and everything that God had done in me, through me, by me, for me. I didn't care, because my boy was gone. But the truth of the matter is, when God told me that my son was okay, that my son was going to be okay, he is okay. But I couldn't see with my eyes because I was looking with my natural eyes. I wasn't looking with my spiritual eyes. And all I could say to myself was, here it is. I only had one child. My son is gone. I don't have any more kids. My lineage ends with him. God, how could you allow this to happen? I served you. I've been serving you. I started trusting you like I never trusted anybody else before. You asked me to trust you. I trusted you. But my boy is gone. And I just was like, it's whatever. I'm down for whatever at this point. But the more I indulged, the more I started becoming convicted about my decisions and the things that I was doing. And then from there, I started getting sick. And God just started dealing with me with all the different things that I was dealing with internally and how I was keeping it in. And so much so that I ended up having a conversation with my apostle. And after the conversation, during the conversation, she says, Zanetta, God has just been waiting on you to put your heart in his hands. And when she just kept saying that throughout our conversation. And once we got off the phone, I just got an instant tearful download. And I started writing my next book. And that next book is entitled In My Father's Hands. And it comes out May 31st, 2025. And I pray that you guys come out, support, order the book, whatever it is that you guys, however you want to support. I appreciate your support in advance, and I thank you in advance. And that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. So if you want me to go more in depth, you're gonna have to read my words on the pages. I have my first book is entitled The Colors of My Wings. My second book is entitled Once Broken. My third book is entitled The Weight and the Weight. My fourth book is entitled The Potter's Wheel. And this book is entitled In My Father's Hands. All of my stories talk about my journey through life and my journey without Christ and with Christ. It talks about the triumphs that I have gone through and received in my life. It talks about the turmoil that I have received in my life. And I just believe that God uses me in a way to show people that no matter what you go through in life, it doesn't have to dictate your situation and circumstances, that it doesn't have to dictate who you become in life as a person, as a young man, as a young woman, as an older man or older woman, as a person in general. So I pray that my story can bless someone and help someone who doesn't think that they have the ability to change or come up out of whatever situation that they may be enduring. I pray that my story blesses you and encourages you to just take one step, because when you take one step, God will take two. So that's it. Peace out. God bless you all. And I pray to hear more from you. I'm going to do my best to start spending more time, having conversations with you guys on lives and things of that nature, especially before the book comes out. And I appreciate you guys and thank you in advance for your support. God bless you.